In a small observatory high in the mountains of Colorado, Dr. Emily Carter sat alone in the dim glow of her computer screens. The room was quiet except for the soft hum of machines and the occasional beep from her equipment. Emily had spent years studying the stars, searching for something, anything, that might prove humans weren't alone in the universe. Tonight, she found it. Her eyes widened as she stared at the data streaming across one of the monitors. A faint signal, barely noticeable at first, pulsed through the static. It wasn't random noise. It repeated in a pattern, like a heartbeat coming from deep space. At first, she thought it might be interference or a glitch in the system. But when she ran the signal through a decoding program, her heart skipped a beat. Words began to form on the screen. Helpless. Emily leaned closer, her fingers trembling as she typed commands into the keyboard. She wanted to make sure she wasn't imagining things. After hours of work, she confirmed the signal was real. It came from a distant star system far beyond anything humanity had explored. Her mind raced with questions. Who sent it? Why now? And what did they need help with? The next morning, Emily shared her discovery with her colleague Alan Brooks. He was a tall man with sharp features and a skeptical demeanor. When Emily showed him the decoded message, he crossed his arms and frowned. "Are you sure this isn't just some kind of cosmic fluke?" he asked. "Or maybe someone's idea of a prank?" Emily shook her head. "I've double-checked everything. This is real. Someone, or something, is trying to communicate with us." Alan sighed and rubbed the back of his neck. "Even if it's real, what do we do about it? We can't just jump into a spaceship and go investigate." Emily didn't respond right away. She knew Alan had a point, but she also felt a deep responsibility. If there really was intelligent life out there asking for help, ignoring them would be wrong. Over the next few days, she worked tirelessly to gather more information about the signal. Using advanced telescopes, she pinpointed its origin, a star system on the edge of known space. What she saw there made her jaw drop. There were signs of artificial structures orbiting one of the planets in the system. They looked ancient, their surfaces scarred by time and debris. Emily couldn't believe what she was seeing. These weren't natural formations. They were ruins, left behind by an alien civilization. And they seemed to match symbols she'd seen before, carved into rocks and artifacts found in ancient sites all over Earth. When Emily showed Alan the images, even he couldn't deny the significance of the discovery. "This changes everything," he muttered, staring at the screen. "If these aliens are connected to Earth somehow, we have to tell someone." They decided to bring their findings to the United Nations Space Council. Rachel Dawson, a diplomat known for her calm leadership, listened carefully as Emily explained the situation. Rachel's expression remained neutral, but Emily could see the weight of the decision pressing down on her. Finally, Rachel nodded. "We'll send a team to investigate," she said, "but we need to be careful. We don't know what or who we're dealing with." As Emily left the meeting, she felt a mix of excitement and fear. They were about to embark on a journey that could change the course of human history. But deep down, she wondered if they were ready for what they might find. The decision to investigate the mysterious signal didn't come easily. Rachel Dawson, the diplomat leading the discussions at the United Nations Space Council, knew the risks involved. Sending a team into deep space could expose Earth's location to unknown dangers. But ignoring the cry for help felt wrong, especially after seeing the evidence Emily and Alan had presented. After hours of debate, Rachel gave the go-ahead for a small, highly skilled crew to travel to the source of the signal. The mission was assigned to the Odyssey, a sleek spacecraft designed for long-distance exploration. Its crew included Marcus Lee, an experienced pilot with steady hands and quick reflexes, and Clara Bennett, a young xenobiologist eager to prove herself. Both were chosen not just for their skills, but also for their ability to stay calm under pressure. They would be joined by Alan Brooks, who insisted on coming along to monitor the signal firsthand, and Emily Carter, whose expertise in decoding the message made her indispensable. Before leaving, The crew spent days preparing for the journey. Supplies were loaded onto the ship, systems were checked and rechecked, and simulations were run to ensure everyone knew their roles. The mood was tense but focused. None of them had ever been part of a mission like this before. As they boarded the Odyssey, each member carried a mix of excitement and anxiety. They were about to leave Earth behind, venturing farther into space than any human had gone before. The trip took weeks, during which the crew worked tirelessly to analyze the signal and plan their approach. Emily spent most of her time hunched over her equipment, fine-tuning the decoding algorithms. Alan stayed close, offering suggestions and occasionally arguing with her about minor details. Despite their differences, they made a good team. Marcus kept the ship running smoothly, while Clara studied every piece of data they had on alien life forms, trying to prepare for whatever they might encounter. Finally, they'd reached the star system where the signal originated. What they found there left them speechless. Orbiting a dying planet was a cluster of massive structures, clearly artificial, though heavily damaged by time and collisions with space debris. The ruins floated silently against the backdrop of stars, their surfaces covered in strange symbols that glowed faintly in the darkness. Clara gasped when she saw them. "Those markings, they're similar to the ones we've seen on Earth," she said, pointing to her tablet, which displayed images of ancient carvings. Emily nodded, her eyes wide with wonder. "It's like these aliens knew us, or at least something about us, long ago." As the Odyssey moved closer, the crew began scanning the ruins. Their instruments picked up traces of metal alloys and organic compounds, suggesting the structures had once housed living beings. Marcus carefully maneuvered the ship around the debris field, ensuring they didn't collide with anything. "This place gives me the creeps," he muttered, glancing out the viewport. "Feels like we're disturbing a graveyard." Clara, however, was fascinated. She suited up for an extravehicular activity, EVA, mission to collect samples from one of the larger ruins. With Alan monitoring her vitals and Marcus keeping watch from the cockpit, she floated toward the structure, her movements slow and deliberate. When she touched the surface, she felt a strange vibration, almost like a heartbeat. Using tools from her belt, she scraped off fragments of material and placed them into a container. Back on the ship, Clara examined the samples under a microscope. Her expression grew serious as she analyzed the results. "These aren't just ruins," she said finally. "They're ships, or what's left of them. And whoever built them wasn't human." The discovery sent a chill through the crew. If these aliens weren't human, then why did their symbols match those found on Earth? And what did it mean for humanity now that they'd been contacted? As they continued exploring, the crew couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. Every shadow seemed to move, every sound echoed louder than it should have. Whatever secrets the ruins held, they weren't giving them up easily. By the end of the day, the crew gathered in the ship's common area to discuss their findings. No one spoke for a moment. The weight of what they'd uncovered hung heavy in the air. Finally, Emily broke the silence. "We need to keep going," she said firmly. "Whatever happened here, it's connected to us, to Earth. We can't turn back now." The others nodded, though doubt lingered in their eyes. They were far from home, surrounded by mysteries they barely understood. But one thing was clear: the answers they sought were within reach, and so were the dangers. Back on Earth, news of the Odyssey's discovery spread quickly. People around the world were captivated by the idea that humans might not be alone in the universe. Social media buzzed with theories and speculation, while news outlets ran non-stop coverage of the mission. But not everyone was excited. Some groups claimed the government had known about aliens for years and was only now revealing the truth. Others warned that contacting extraterrestrial life could lead to disaster. Among those watching closely was Daniel Hayes, a historian who spent his days studying ancient myths and legends. He had always been fascinated by stories of war giants, massive beings said to have protected Earth in its earliest days. Most people dismissed these tales as fiction, but Daniel believed there was truth hidden within them. When he saw images of the alien ruins broadcast on the news, something clicked in his mind. The symbols carved into the structures matched those found in carvings linked to the war giant legends. Daniel pored over old texts and artifacts, piecing together clues that had eluded scholars for centuries. He became convinced that the aliens' distress call wasn't just a coincidence. It was connected to the war giants. According to the myths, the giants had been built to defend Earth against threats from the stars. If the signal woke them up, humanity might face consequences it wasn't prepared for. Meanwhile, strange things began happening on Earth. Seismic activity increased in places where earthquakes rarely occurred, deep underground. Tremors shook cities, causing cracks to form in streets and buildings. In remote areas, rivers changed course overnight, and strange metallic sounds echoed from beneath the surface. Scientists scrambled to explain the phenomena, but their theories didn't add up. Something big was moving far below the ground. Governments around the world grew nervous. Emergency meetings were held, and military forces were put on high alert. No one knew what to expect, but the signs pointed to something extraordinary and possibly dangerous. Daniel, however, thought differently. He believed the tremors were a sign that the war giants were awakening, stirred by the alien signal. If he was right, humanity needed to find a way to control them before it was too late. Determined to uncover the truth, Daniel traveled to Antarctica, where ancient maps suggested the giants' control center might be hidden. The journey was grueling, with freezing temperatures and treacherous terrain testing his resolve. But Daniel pressed on, driven by the belief that he was doing something important, not just for himself, but for all of humanity. After days of searching, he and his small team discovered a massive metal door buried under layers of ice. It was covered in the same symbols seen in the alien ruins and ancient carvings. Using tools and knowledge gained from years of research, Daniel managed to unlock the door. Beyond it lay a vast chamber filled with glowing consoles and towering machines. The air hummed with energy, and the walls were lined with intricate patterns that pulsed faintly with light. In the center of the room stood rows of enormous figures, war giants, just as the legends described. Each one was made of sleek metal and stood taller than any building Daniel had ever seen. They looked like sleeping soldiers, waiting for orders. Daniel's heart raced as he approached the nearest console. He realized that these machines weren't fully automated. They required pilots to operate them. Without human guidance, the giants would remain dormant. As Daniel worked to understand the controls, he couldn't help but feel a mix of awe and fear. The power at his fingertips was unimaginable, but so was the responsibility. If he succeeded in awakening the giants, humanity might gain protectors unlike anything the world had ever seen. But if he failed, or worse, if someone else took control, the consequences could be catastrophic. Outside, the tremors grew stronger, shaking the icy landscape. Time was running out. Daniel knew he had to act fast. Whatever was coming, Earth would need its war giants ready to fight. As the crew of the Odyssey continued exploring the alien ruins, they uncovered more than just broken ships and mysterious symbols. Hidden within one of the larger structures was a chamber filled with strange devices and holographic projections. Clara, the xenobiologist, carefully examined the equipment while Emily and Alan deciphered the information displayed in the glowing images. What they found chilled them to the bone. The signal wasn't sent by survivors. It was a trap. The aliens who created the ruins weren't victims. They were invaders. A species called the Exitherians had been conquering planets for centuries, using false distress calls to lure unsuspecting civilizations into revealing themselves. Once contact was made, the Exitherians would arrive in force, enslaving or destroying anyone who stood in their way. The dying planet they now orbited was one of many worlds the invaders had left in ruins. Clara analyzed fragments of biological material found inside the chamber. Through her microscope, she identified traces of engineered DNA. "These creatures aren't natural," she said, her voice trembling. "They're designed for war. Every part of them is optimized for domination." Marcus, listening from the ship's cockpit, clenched his fists on the controls. "So we've basically told them exactly where to find us," he muttered darkly. The realization weighed heavily on everyone. By responding to the signal, humanity had unknowingly painted a target on Earth. Back home, the news spread like wildfire when the *Odyssey* transmitted its findings. Panic erupted as people realized an alien fleet was likely already en route to Earth. Governments scrambled to prepare defenses, but it was clear that conventional weapons wouldn't stand a chance against the advanced technology described in the report. Cities buzzed with fear, and protests broke out in the streets. Some demanded immediate action, while others argued it was too late to fight back. Daniel Hayes, still working in the Antarctic chamber, received updates about the discovery through sporadic communications. His heart sank as he pieced together the implications. The Exetherians weren't just a threat, they were an extinction-level event. Humanity needed the war giants more than ever, but time was running out. Activating the machines required pilots, and finding volunteers willing to risk everything wouldn't be easy. Despite the chaos, Daniel pressed on. He spent hours studying the consoles, learning how to interface with the giants' systems. Each machine seemed to respond to neural input, meaning pilots would have to synchronize their minds with the colossi. It was dangerous work. Too much strain could overwhelm a human brain, but there was no other option. As tremors rocked the ice above him, Daniel knew the Exetherians were close. Their arrival would bring destruction unlike anything Earth had ever faced. In orbit around the alien ruins, the *Odyssey* detected movement in deep space. A massive fleet of ships emerged from hyperspace, heading straight for Earth. The vessels were enormous, dwarfing anything humans had ever built. Their sleek, insect-like designs bristled with weapons capable of obliterating entire cities in seconds. Marcus piloted the *Odyssey* closer to get a better look, but even at a distance, the sight was terrifying. "We need to warn Earth," Emily said urgently. Her hands flew across her keyboard as she compiled data to send back. "They need to know what's coming, and how little time we have left." Ellen nodded grimly. "And we need to figure out if those ruins can teach us anything useful. Maybe there's a weakness we can exploit." Clara, meanwhile, focused on analyzing the Exetherian biology samples. If she could understand how the invaders functioned, she might find a way to stop them, or at least slow them down. But her progress was slow, and the pressure mounted with each passing hour. On Earth, Rachel Dawson worked tirelessly to unite world leaders under a single plan. She coordinated efforts to evacuate major cities and prepare makeshift shelters underground. Military forces mobilized, though everyone knew traditional tactics wouldn't hold up against the Exetherians. Meanwhile, Daniel sent out a global call for volunteers to pilot the war giants. To his surprise, thousands answered. Ordinary people stepped forward, ready to sacrifice themselves for the survival of their species. As the alien fleet drew nearer, the stage was set for a battle that would decide the fate of humanity. The war giants stirred beneath the ice, their power waiting to be unleashed. But whether Earth could stand against the Exetherians remained uncertain. For now, all anyone could do was hope, for courage, for strength, and for a miracle. The call for volunteers to pilot the war giants spread across the globe, reaching every corner of Earth. People from all walks of life stepped forward. Soldiers, scientists, teachers, farmers, and even teenagers who had never held a weapon in their hands. They came not because they were fearless, but because they believed in something greater than themselves. Among them were Marcus Lee and Clara Bennett, who returned to Earth just in time to join the effort. Daniel Hayes led the training program, working tirelessly to prepare the volunteers for what lay ahead. The process was grueling. Each pilot had to connect their mind to a war giant using a neural interface, a technology far beyond anything humanity had ever used. At first, many struggled to maintain the connection. The giant systems flooded their minds with overwhelming sensations, memories of ancient battles, feelings of immense power, and glimpses of civilizations long gone. Some couldn't handle it and had to be pulled out of the machines, but those who stayed grew stronger with each attempt. Marcus adapted quickly, his years as a pilot giving him an edge. He learned to control the giant's movements with precision, guiding its massive limbs as if they were extensions of his own body. Clara, though less experienced, surprised everyone with her determination. Her scientific background helped her understand the giant's systems faster than most, and she developed strategies to maximize their effectiveness in battle. Together, the pilots formed a bond, united by their shared purpose. As the Exitherian fleet approached Earth, the atmosphere grew tense. Cities emptied as millions fled to underground shelters. Governments declared martial law, and military forces prepared for a desperate last stand. Rachel Dawson worked around the clock to ensure coordination between nations, urging unity in the face of extinction. "We're stronger together," she told world leaders during an emergency meeting. "If we fight as one, we have a chance." When the Exitherians finally arrived, the sky turned black with their ships. Massive vessels descended over major cities, unleashing devastating attacks. Buildings crumbled, fires raged, and the ground shook with explosions. The invaders deployed swarms of smaller craft, each armed with weapons that could cut through steel like paper. It seemed hopeless. But then, the war giants emerged. One by one, they rose from beneath the ice and earth, towering over everything around them. Their metallic forms gleamed under the sun as they marched toward the front lines. Piloted by brave men and women, the giants unleashed their full power. Energy beams shot from their arms, vaporizing enemy fighters in seconds. Their footsteps shook the ground, sending shockwaves that crippled entire squadrons of Exitherian drones. The battle was chaotic and brutal. The giants fought valiantly, but the Exitherians adapted quickly. Their ships released clouds of nanobots that latched onto the giants' armor, eating away at their defenses. Explosions rocked the battlefield as both sides clashed with relentless fury. Despite their size and strength, the giants weren't invincible. Several fell after sustaining critical damage, their pilots sacrificing themselves to protect innocent lives. Clara and Marcus fought side by side, coordinating their movements to cover each other's weaknesses. Clara used her knowledge of the giant systems to disable enemy weapons, while Marcus charged headlong into the fray, drawing fire away from civilians. Daniel, piloting the largest giant, took on entire fleets single-handedly, his machine glowing brighter with every blow it dealt. Even so, the cost was high. Cities burned, and countless lives were lost. But the pilots refused to give up. They drew strength from the memories embedded in the giants, the stories of past heroes who had stood against impossible odds. With every step forward, they carried the hopes of humanity on their shoulders. As the battle raged on, it became clear that defeating the Exitherians would require more than brute force. The pilots needed to find a way to strike at the heart of the invasion, the enemy flagship. If they could destroy it, the rest of the fleet might retreat. But reaching the flagship meant fighting through waves of enemies, knowing that survival was unlikely. Still, the pilots pressed on, driven by the belief that their sacrifice could save the world. For now, Earth's fate hung in the balance. The war giants had awoken, and humanity had risen to meet the challenge. But victory was far from certain, and the final chapter of this story had yet to be written. The battle against the Exitherians reached its breaking point. The war giants, though powerful, were outnumbered and outmatched. Enemy ships swarmed like insects, relentless in their attacks. Every step forward came at a cost. Several pilots had already fallen, their giants collapsing in fiery explosions as they shielded civilians or fellow warriors. Despite the losses, those who remained refused to back down. Clara Bennett knew what had to be done. During her analysis of the Exitherian biology samples, she had discovered a critical weakness. Their central command ship relied on a single core to coordinate the fleet's movements. If that core could be destroyed, the entire invasion would collapse into disarray. But reaching it meant navigating through the heart of the enemy forces, a suicide mission with almost no chance of survival. Marcus Lee volunteered immediately. "I'll draw their fire," he said, his voice steady despite the chaos around him. "You focus on taking out the core." Clara hesitated, knowing what this would mean for Marcus, but there was no time to argue. She nodded, her eyes filled with gratitude and sorrow. "Be careful," she whispered before turning her attention to the plan. Daniel Hayes took charge of the largest giant, determined to lead the final assault. His machine, taller and more heavily armored than the others, acted as both shield and battering ram. As he charged toward the flagship, smaller Cytherian ships peeled off from the main force to intercept him. Explosions erupted around him, shaking the ground beneath his feet, but Daniel didn't falter. He pushed forward, each step bringing humanity closer to victory, or annihilation. Marcus followed close behind, drawing enemy fire away from Daniel and Clara. His giant absorbed hit after hit, its armor cracking under the relentless barrage. Sparks flew inside the cockpit as systems began to fail. Still, Marcus kept moving, buying precious seconds for the others. When a swarm of drones surrounded him, he unleashed everything his giant had left. A devastating energy blast that wiped them out, but left his machine critically damaged. With one last glance at Earth below, Marcus smiled faintly. "For everyone back home," he muttered, just before his giant exploded in a blinding flash of light. Clara watched the explosion from afar, tears streaming down her face, but there was no time to grieve. Guided by Daniel's cover fire, she maneuvered her giant toward the flagship's core. The enemy defenses intensified as she approached, forcing her to dodge beams of energy and clouds of nanobots trying to tear apart her machine. Her hands trembled on the controls, but she focused on the task ahead. This was why she had come, to protect humanity, no matter the cost. Finally, Clara reached the flagship's core. It pulsed with an eerie blue light, surrounded by layers of shielding. Using every bit of knowledge she had gained from studying the giant's systems, Clara directed her machine's power into a concentrated beam. The attack pierced through the shields, striking the core dead center. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the core began to destabilize, glowing brighter and brighter until it erupted in a massive explosion. The shockwave rippled through space, tearing apart nearby Cytherian ships. Without their command center, the remaining vessels lost coordination, scattering in confusion. Below, people emerged from shelters to witness the spectacle, alien ships retreating, their once invincible fleet now in ruins. But Clara's triumph came at a price. Her giant, weakened by the battle, collapsed under the strain of the explosion. She tried to eject, but the controls failed. As her vision faded, she thought of Earth, the planet she had saved, and felt a deep sense of peace. Daniel, battered but alive, watched as Clara's giant fell silent. Tears welled up in his eyes, but he forced himself to stay focused. The war wasn't over yet. There were still stragglers to deal with, survivors to protect. Slowly, he guided his own giant back toward Earth, carrying the weight of all they had lost and all they had achieved. When the dust settled, the world stood forever changed. The Cytherians were gone, but the scars of their invasion remained. Cities lay in ruins, and millions mourned loved ones lost. Yet amid the devastation, there was hope. Humanity had faced extinction and survived. The war giants returned to dormancy, their job done, but their legacy endured. And though the pilots had paid a heavy price, their courage would never be forgotten. In the days that followed the battle, Earth began to heal. The Cytherian fleet was gone, its ships either destroyed or retreating into the depths of space. Smoke still rose from ruined cities, and the scars of war were everywhere. But life slowly started to return to normal. Survivors emerged from underground shelters, blinking in the sunlight, unsure of what kind of world awaited them. What they found was a planet forever changed, not just by the invasion, but by the courage of those who had fought to save it. Rachel Dawson stood before the United Nations Space Council, addressing leaders from every nation. Her voice was steady, though her eyes showed the weight of everything she had witnessed. "We faced an enemy unlike any we've ever known," she said, "and we survived because we came together. Humanity proved that when we stand united, there is no challenge we cannot overcome." The council erupted in applause, but Rachel's thoughts were with those who hadn't made it. Marcus Lee, Clara Bennett, and countless others had given their lives to protect Earth. Their sacrifices would never be forgotten, and plans were already underway to honor them. Monuments would be built, stories told, and their names etched into history as heroes who saved humanity from extinction. Daniel Hayes, one of the few surviving pilots, walked through the streets of his hometown. The town had been spared the worst of the destruction, but reminders of the war were everywhere: cracked roads, burned-out buildings, and makeshift memorials for the fallen. People stopped to thank him wherever he went, calling him a hero. Daniel didn't feel like one. He carried the memories of those who hadn't returned, their faces, their voices, their final moments. Every night, he dreamed of the giants and the battles they had fought. Sometimes, he wondered if Earth would ever truly be safe again. Despite the lingering fear, there was also hope. The war giants had awakened something in humanity, a sense of unity and resilience. For years, nations had argued over borders, resources, and power. But the Exetherian invasion had shown everyone how fragile those divisions were. In the face of a common threat, humanity had set aside its differences and worked together. Now, people talked about building a better future, not just for themselves, but for generations to come. Scientists studied the ruins left behind by the Exetherians, hoping to learn from their technology. Engineers worked to repair damaged infrastructure, while architects designed new cities that could withstand future attacks. Schools taught children about the war giants and the bravery of the pilots who had operated them. Even those too young to remember the battle grew up knowing the story of how humanity had stood against impossible odds. Deep beneath the surface, the war giants returned to dormancy. Their massive forms lay silent once more, waiting for the day they might be needed again. Daniel visited the Antarctic chamber often, standing among the towering machines and remembering the friends he had lost. He knew the giants weren't just weapons. They were symbols of humanity's strength and determination. As long as they existed, Earth would always have protectors. One evening, as Daniel stood on a hill overlooking the horizon, he thought about the future. The Exetherians were gone, but the universe was vast and full of unknown dangers. Humanity couldn't afford to forget what had happened. They had to remain vigilant, ready to defend themselves if another threat arose. But for now, the stars seemed peaceful, twinkling faintly in the night sky. Daniel smiled faintly, feeling a quiet sense of pride. The war had cost much, but it had also brought out the best in humanity. People had shown courage, compassion, and an unshakable will to survive. Whatever challenges lay ahead, Daniel believed they could face them together. As he turned to leave, the wind picked up, carrying with it the faint hum of energy from deep below. The war giants slept, but their presence lingered, a reminder of what humanity had achieved, and what it was capable of achieving again. The battle was over, but the story of Earth's awakening had only just begun.